Hello, and welcome to part 39 of this mod making series for the mod Locked Loot Containers. And, yeah, I hadn't recorded in a little bit, and the past few days I've made, like, a decent amount of progress on, the mod, at least in terms of code and stuff. And, I decided that, since I've made a decent amount of progress, I might as well make a, little video cataloging that, kind of. And then maybe even at the end, depending on how long that goes, shouldn't be very long, I will maybe do a little bit of actual coding or progress on recording here, camera, whatever. Don't know why I was considering not using the face cam, but I said screw it. So I was like, all right, whatever. Just put the face cam, screw it. I guess I might as well show the stuff that I'm probably not going to go too much over. Well, like it's actually showing it's not going to be that useful. More than just talking about it. So I believe since the last video I made, this is the first commit that I've made since then, or I've made just after then. What was it? I did stuff on the chest bashing formula, basically a bunch of code for that involving that. Just a lot of copy and paste here and there. Is there anything specific though that I added that was noteworthy? Besides some new methods to encapsulate these formulas and stuff. Not that I can necessarily see. I put in some stuff for I was basically changing around how the actual chests would, or the actual chest objects would track how many bashes were done and stuff like that. And I kind of settled on a system of like light and hard bashes. And the determination of if it was a light or a hard bash would be just based on some many variables like the user's strength and the material that the chest is made out of, the stability, whatever, what kind of weapon they're using, stuff like that. So, like, lighter bashes would have less effect on the stuff inside, but it would also have less ability each time to have a chance of opening either the breaking off the lock or opening up the chest by force. And hard bashes would be ones that would have more effect on the stuff inside, but it would obviously have more effect on in the end, on the potential chances of breaking open the chest or breaking off the lock from a bash attempt. What did I do here in the day afterward? Yeah, it doesn't look like much. I think I basically just put, yeah, I didn't get too much done. I basically started the framework for the actual, like, method slash formulas, whatever you want to call it, for actually affecting the vitals, I guess you could say, of the player from the action of bashing. So like if you hit the chest with your hands, with your bare hands, then you're gonna take health damage. But I didn't want it to be like an arena where it was basically kind of like an oversight of that little mechanic where if you bash a door, you actually take health damage. But they never actually made it kill you if your health went low enough. So your health would actually roll backward into the negatives. And I think it would actually, it might have overflown back to like maximum, like whatever the maximum might have been after a point or some shit. Just like buggy, weird behavior. So I said, okay, so I limited how much the health can be drained to like 40% or something like that. So that kind of thing can't happen, hopefully. At least that's the idea, is that that can't happen. But then, if your health is below that amount and you still try to bash, then the fatigue cost just becomes like three times, like, man, I can't, eh? Three, yeah, just becomes like three times greater or something like that. So, yeah, that's kind of the idea, is that if you hit a solid object with your hands, it's not going to necessarily kill you, but it's going to hurt a lot, and it's going to, I mean, it's probably going to hurt enough that you might even, if you bash it enough like an idiot, go unconscious and stuff. That's the cost. And since you're not damaging a weapon, similar to when you bash doors, there's no cost in that case in the vanilla game. So it's like, why would you not bash with your fist? Which is kind of stupid, but that's how it works. But then I did the similar stuff for the weapons, or if you're using not unarmed. And in those cases, you still take fatigue damage, probably not as much, depending on certain factors, like mostly your endurance and willpower and stuff like that. I think and luck. I think luck is taken into account too. I forget. It might be, but mostly endurance and willpower, I think, in that case. Um, but your weapon is damaged a lot, or at least it's damaged a good amount depending on many factors, as I said, other factors or whatever. So your fatigue and your weapon is damaged from the action of bashing. So that's where I was putting in the framework for that kind of logic or work, however you want to call it, work logic. And then the day afterward, looks like even less progress. But yeah, okay, maybe not necessarily less, but more progress, and it was pretty damn messy the way that these formulas were kind of coming out, and it's still pretty damn messy with these particular formulas for whatever reason. Well, not so much whatever reason, but for reasons, kind of unnecessarily messy looking, but oh well. As I mentioned in that other video, it's like whatever with the messiness. And then just a few days ago is when I started to make a lot more progress, or a much more rapid pace after, I guess, a few day break, kind of just not doing anything. Actually, yeah, that was like a week break or some shit, I think, if I'm going by that. Something like that. Um, what did I do? I started work because I think I just had finished mostly the bashing cost to your actual player, that being your vitals as well as your weapon that you're using, if you are using one. And in this one, I think I started the actual framework stuff for damaging the contents of the loot inside of the chest from bashing, which I was kind of, I mean, I'm still not like ecstatic about how I've done it because I haven't done any testing to see how it actually performs and stuff like that. I really don't think it's gonna have that much of an issue since it's not something that's happening like every frame or whatever. Um, but just the fact that it is looping or iterating through the entire inventory of the chest, which, in most cases probably not going to be like a massive amount of items uh per chest, but potentially at some point, who knows. So I don't want it to cause performance issues, which I don't think it will, but you still think about that kind of crap. um I think it should be fine though, generally, even though I was not a huge fan of doing it this way. I think it was probably the best way at the time I could think of doing it. So I just was like, all right, let's just do it this like this. And is that basically the idea is that every time you bash the chest, every time you attempt to bash on the chest, is it well, let's see if I could. I mean, honestly, it would probably be better if I just look at my actual code instead of on that uh GitHub desktop thing where the lines are all kind of fucked up. Chest bashing logic. Yeah, and this is all the stuff with the lock bashing and the rolls for all this and stuff. Pretty messy, but eh. Um, where is it? Bashing damage loot contents. Okay, so this happens inside of the apply bashing cost logic, which is where the player takes damage and stuff like that. It happens just before all that stuff happens. Not that it really matters which happens first, but that's how I have it happening currently. The sequence. Yeah. So when it first goes through this bashing damage loop contents, it passes all these variables and stuff, like the most important ones, like chest, the chest object itself, the weapon being used, if any, the weapon skill ID, which is only important just for these kind of if statements to tell what weapon is being used, basically, what type at least. Hit lock, hit wood, hard bash. Really, I can get rid of that, but yeah, I'll just leave it there, whatever. But basically, I have currently the three different, at least for these physical bashing types, the three different weapon types I am currently using this by or determining this with. That being unarmed, blunt weapons, like anything that is considered a blunt weapon, like a staff or a warhammer or a flail or a mace, whatever, all that kind of stuff, and then everything else, which would be like any bladed weapons, anything that is not a blunt or an unarmed thing, is in that third category. And basically, the idea is that if you hit the lock directly, because I didn't actually mention that, I don't think, is that there is a roll when you bash the chest that determines, based on a bunch of variables and stuff, mostly attributes and everything like agility and all that crap, if you hit the actual lock of the chest or you just hit the body of the chest. Like imagine if what's a example, kind of like that scene from Titanic. It's kind of a bad example, I guess, but that scene from Titanic where what's his face, the guy Leonardo DiCaprio is in the he's handcuffed and Rose, and they're both the ship is capsizing and all that crap. It's filling up with water, and then he has the handcuffs, and then he tells her to use this fire axe to cut the the chains on the handcuffs to so he could actually move his hands or whatever. And then she, like he tells her how to like do it or whatever, how to do it without hitting him with the axe, and then she just closed her eyes and then lucky enough was able to hit the actual like lucky enough, it's a stupid movie, but to hit the actual chains to break the cuffs instead of hitting him or something. It's kind of like that where you're trying to hit the lock itself to break the lock off, because one, you think it'd be easier to break off a lock instead of, say, if it is a metal most of the time it's going to be metal materials most likely for the chest. So you'd probably want to hit a lock before it's like a lock that has a it's probably that's how I'm thinking about it. It's probably easier obviously to break a lock than it is to break a entire chest that's made out of metal or something open. So you're probably going to want to actively try to hit the lock if you're trying to actually break the thing open. So the optimal thing is that you'd hit the lock itself. So you take a roll every time you try to hit the chest, and that roll is determined by many factors. And basically it says, okay, either you hit the chest itself, the body of the chest, or you hit the lock itself on the chest. And based on that, determines the degree that certain items inside of the chest will actually be damaged from that bashing attempt. So, like, if you hit the lock, as I'm trying to get the point across here is that if you hit the lock, it's not going to not damage things in there at all per se. It's just it's going to be a lot less damaging and a lot less likely to be damaging to the stuff inside of the chest compared to hitting just, wailing on it with a fucking hammer on the body, and then it's probably the stuff inside is going to get jostled around and screwed up. Maybe not to the extent of actually things like being destroyed per se, but for balance reasons and to have a trade-off, that's what I'm getting across here, is that that stuff will actually be damaged and or destroyed entirely. And junk items will be left over to indicate, by the way, you in your bashing or whatever you did or whatever happened eventually when a trap goes off or something like that, when I add traps, but that's not going to happen in the first release. The first public release of this, almost definitely. But you'll know that something was destroyed in that process to be like, hey, there was something else in here. It's not just going to disappear, so you'll be like, oh, well, it was just a chest without many items. You'll actually be like, you'll see the junk items and say, well, there was something here that I destroyed, or my actions caused something that I could have looted that was more useful to be destroyed, or to leave me this junk item instead. That's the idea. But yeah, if you hit the lock, it's going to damage the contents less compared to hitting the body, as well as hitting the lock generally is going to make it easier to open. Like, if you actually hit the lock consistently, it's going to be easier to break the lock open eventually with that, compared to just hitting the chest. So if your skills suck and your accuracy sucks or whatever, then you're not going to be able to hit the lock as often. But if your skills are pretty good and you have good accuracy, then you're going to be able to hit the lock more often and do hopefully less damage to the contents. And, increase your yield for actually getting that chest open. And that's kind of the main idea. Like, just like the little number nitty-gritty crap doesn't really matter, in terms of explaining it. It's basically like, unarmed, for right now, it's like, how much damage could you really do with your hands to, like, the stuff inside besides just the blunt force, like, jostling around, like, suplexing it or something, compared to, say, bashing it with a giant, well, not giant, but bashing it with a warhammer, that, or, like, a big claymore or something like that. But, like, the kind of other things that I did to kind of determine these things, it's mostly just me using more switch cases. And it's not like pretty, but I think it works. And I don't like overusing switch cases because I know it supposedly uses like some amount of memory to have these switch cases, even though it's a lot faster than like a giant chain of if statements. So I'd much rather do it like this, but I don't want to overdo it as much as possible. So stuff like useless item 1, which is a item group that carries the what is it? The item that is used for potions, that being the glass bottles. I have that under the item sturdiness of very fragile, and then a whole bunch of other things I have under fragile, and then a bunch of other things after that I have under solid, and then resilient, and then the last one unbreakable and stuff. And that's just the values that I've given it for now, which I then use to determine what items should be damaged and by how much and stuff. And then I have the actual, like, work logic part in its own method here because it saved a lot of repetition for the actual destruction and damaging of said items when they do get rolled to be damaged. After the items get looped through within the inventory of the chest. I have not done any testing yet of pretty much any of these commits that I've made. Even though I have a decent degree of confidence that they should work on a basic level. This one, I'll just have to see, and then I'll just have to fix it based on what I observe. The only real problem that I see is that when I destroy an item, I'm looping through it, the actual like previous inventory or whatever. So when I remove an item from said inventory, then the actual loop. So what I did was, if an item does get destroyed, then it also gets replaced by the junk item, obviously. But I don't want the loop to continue as if it thinks that there's like still more items or something like that. I don't know how it's actually gonna work, like I said, so I'm probably gonna have to do a little bit of revision of that, I can imagine. But the actual like damaging items is determined like weapons take durability damage, and then if they take durability damage over to zero, then they actually break and get destroyed into their lesser parts, or their in this case is going to be custom items. Where are those? Yeah. Determine destroyed loot refuse type. So I'm gonna be adding like, I think it's 12 new custom items, which are just gonna be like these junk items basically. Um, and it's gonna be stuff like for the bottles, the potions, if those break, then they get replaced by just these glass fragment junk items to like be like, hey, you broke something that was glass or something around there. Same thing with uh oil, I think. Yeah, eventually I get down there at some point and stuff like that. For stuff like armor and weapons, it gets broken down into like material name, and then scraps. Um, except for arrows, which for arrows they are different, and you will get a broken arrow instead. For clothing items, it'd be tattered cloth as well as bandages. Did I remember to add those? Let me check. Yeah, I did. For bandages. For other stuff like maps and books, and maps, books, and potion recipes, as well as parchment, they will be paper shreds. For stuff like teeth and ivory, as well as tusk, they will be ivory fragments. For most plant ingredients, it'll be clump of plant matter. Blah blah blah. For most other things that are ingredients like creature stuff, it'll be glava gore. Jewelry, destroyed jewelry. I have no idea what these sprites are gonna look like. I could hopefully figure something out so they look okay, I guess. For coins, ruined coins. And for everything else, useless refuse. Um, that's at least just what I have for now. That's going to be the junk items that are replacing the item that had gotten removed or destroyed in these cases. Um, Now I haven't done anything involving the actual like bashing logic for quote unquote bashing logic for stuff like spells, like if you throw a fireball at it or something like that. So I still have to do that. If I'm gonna do that in the first iteration of this mod or the first version or whatever, I might not. I'll see. But I'll probably give different item things maybe for those kind of things. But that's what I wanted to do with that. So handle destroy loot items, and it just loops through the entire inventory each time that a bash attempt happens, and it rolls based on these certain values depending on how, if it was a light or a hard bash, depending if you hit the lock or the chest itself, as well as, did I get to that part yet? Yes, I did, for when you actually break open the chest. Bashing open chest. Yeah. Bro, okay, yeah, I did do another thing. This one is gonna need some work because it's not perfect. Like I probably want it to be even more punishing or damaging or whatever to the contents when that happens, but for now it should be good enough, I guess. So even if you break off the lock, there's still gonna be probably potentially some rolls for damage. Um to the items. If you break open the body, it's going to be even more higher chance of that happening and stuff. So, as to incentivize in many ways, being able to properly open the locks by either lock picking or magic, or like magical open effects with finesse instead of brute force. But you can still use brute force, obviously. It's just it's not going to be the optimal way to do it. At least that's the hope, that it's not the preferred way to do it. And what else was there? I mean, that's most of the stuff. Let me see. That's most of the stuff I've been working on the past few days, and I made good progress on it. Um, Yesterday or last night, whatever, I did a bunch of like reorganization of just kind of where the code was. I'm still mostly using just one class at the moment, that being this lock loot containers main class, because I know there's obviously many reasons to use different classes and stuff, but I found that most of the time, at least the way that I do my mods, it having more separate classes for each different script or file just makes it more confusing to an extent, for me at least, as the person doing the coding and stuff, just because most of the time I've noticed I don't need to have separate instances of all these objects or all these things, because I'm mostly just doing like mathematical formula that could just be a static thing. And when I make separate classes for each script, then it just makes it more confusing than I had to put in more text, because then I have to reference the thing directly in a lot of cases, where I have to say like this file dot this, the class or whatever. It might just be my ignorance, but I mean, if it works, then am I really doing it wrong? I don't think so. So that's why I've been using these partial classes a lot, because that's mainly the reason I would make new scripts, or files, whatever, is just for organizational purposes. Like the only case I think where I have a completely different class right now is for the LLC object, because I don't know if that's necessary, but yeah, that in that case it kind of needs to be like that, because it's actually an instanced object. Like each chest is an instanced object itself. So this makes sense to have it as a separate class. These other ones, they don't, as far as I'm concerned, they don't really have a reason to be a separate class. They're just a partial class for my organizational purposes. Because having thousands of lines on one file is a lot less organized and a lot more annoying to kind of like sift through than just having the same class, partial classes, and each one being in a partial class as well from that one, and just having different names for the files, like that kind of encapsulate whatever you're trying to do in each one, or at least attempts to. So yeah, I did a lot of reorganization for that. Not like a whole lot, but a decent amount. So that was helpful, as well as I started the base kind of work framework. I'm gonna close this part for the actual, since now I think I'm happy enough with the actual physical bashing logic to feel satisfied to move away from it for now, and then go on to other things that are necessary to be worked on. And in this case, the next thing I'm going to be working on is the similar logic for when magic effects get used on it. In this case, just the open effect, the vanilla open spell effect. And I already had like the kind of hard part, I thought, mostly done, just because, well, okay, maybe not necessarily, like the formulas aren't really hard, they're just kind of can be time consuming to kind of think of like how you want to do it exactly. So they're not necessarily hard. It's just that initially when I did this for the open stuff, I was thinking it was going to be difficult, but I just kind of copied the vanilla DFU behavior for that for doors, and sort of just kind of reproduce that for my purposes for these chest objects. And some weird things I noticed with the open effect is that it's kind of weird to explain, is that the chance amount on the spell is not the chance of opening the door or the lock or whatever you're trying to unlock, but that's the chance of you succeeding to cast the actual spell, quote unquote, buff on yourself. Because what happens is when you cast the open effect, it gives you an invisible buff that while that buff is active, the next time you click on a door, then it attempts to unlock that door basically. And the actual like role or logic or formula for if that unlock attempt actually occurs is when you actually click after you get that buff on you. So if say like you could cast open with a 1% chance, but it'll probably keep failing. And you'll never be able to unlock the door because you never actually get the buff on you initially. But you could have a 100% chance to for that cast to succeed and get the buff, but you still won't be able to open a door the way that the formula works. Like if its lock level is higher than your current character level. Not a huge fan of how that works, but that's just kind of how that's how it was attempted to reproduce the effect in Daggerfall itself. Not the best thing, but it's just kind of how it works. So I was like, all right, that kind of sucks for what I'm going to try and do. So initially I was thinking that I was going to try and use the chance of that spell, but now I'm like, you know what? Screw that. Have it so you have to succeed whatever cast that you had. So you have the buff on you. You have to have that buff on you. And then when you click on a chest, while you have the buff, the open effect on you, none of that, besides the fact that you have the open effect on you and you're clicking a chest, anything else involving that spell will not matter. The chance, whatever, all that crap, like, I mean, it is only just a chance. That won't matter. What will matter is when you click on the chest, the spell resistance value of the lock on the chest. At least this is what I'm thinking of. I'm going to do in a little bit or later or whatever whenever I decide to work on this. I'm not going to do it right now because this video's gone on long enough already. But the odds of the chest unlocking or the lock unlocking from the magical effect will be based on when you click it will be based on the lock magic resistance for that chest's lock value. The mysticism skill of the player, of you, the caster. Weirdly enough, it's not alteration. They have mysticism has the open effect in Daggerfall for whatever reason, for whatever they decided to do that. So the mysticism skill, willpower, intelligence, and luck. Willpower, intelligence, yeah, so like five different factors in that case will be determining the chances of it opening. And I've decided that besides the cost of mana and stuff like that to keep casting this, since before I made it so you can jam the lock, and this is what I was thinking of having from the start, but since you could jam the lock with enough lock picking attempt failures, the same deal can happen, or the same deal will be able to happen with a lockpick attempt or magic open effect attempts on the chest's lock. The logic for me being that one, for quote unquote balance reasons, and two, and as well to, I guess, the logic of if you're doing an open effect on the spell, unless that open effect, magical effect or whatever, is like literally melting the lock or something, it probably means that whatever mechanisms are in that lock are probably moving when you use an open effect or something, like just moving to the open position from the magic or whatever. I don't know, but the mechanisms are moving. So if you keep failing or whatever, then somehow those things jam, possibly, or they have a chance of jamming. And then if the things are jammed, then it just becomes inoperable. Like even the magic can't make the things that are jammed move, just as your lockpick can't make it move when it's jammed or something. I don't know. That's the idea that I have for that. And I'm going to have to work on that next time I do this. But yeah, I've been making good progress. That was a lot more rambling than I was kind of expecting, but I don't know. That's the progress I'm making so far, and I'm making good progress. I think besides a lot of testing and a lot of tweaking and stuff, I think I'm getting closer and closer to the 1.0 first public release for this mod, which I'm very happy about. Um, I'm glad that I've gotten somewhat more momentum and motivation to kind of. I mean, I was kind of in like, and I'm still, I don't know, just January of this year, I was feeling a big kind of just, not so much sudden, but a kind of weird wave of like depression or just like a really not nice aura was kind of going around that was affecting me, I guess. Just, I don't know, just the, whatever, the universe, making it not so nice that month. And well, I mean, even not, I don't know, just the start of this year has not been very like felt very good. I've been in a weird place that I was having a hard time being motivated to feel like doing much of this. But somewhat recently, the past like 2 weeks, it's kind of been wafting away those negative feelings or those negative like energies, whatever. And I've been feeling more motivated to work on this and more energetic, I guess, to work on it. So in that case, in that sense, I've been making pretty good and fairly steady progress compared to that, which I'm glad to see. But yeah. Besides all that rambling, thanks for watching this update, and I hope to see you next time. Take care.